Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, it's always a pleasure to be in front of you and with you. Todd Lakey, State Senator from District 23. And I think Senator Hartgen described it best when he came in. This is kind of like a wedding. We have family on both sides of the aisle. We're all here for a good purpose. So, Senators, I always start when I'm talking about Article 5 with the fact that our founding fathers were inspired as they developed our United States Constitution. They were blessed with a collective wisdom that is reflected in that document. Our Constitution has been emulated and used as a basis for government around the world since its inception. The founders were a group of representatives from the various states striving to find a right balance. They recognized the need for a limited federal government with a strong recognition of the states' rights. The 10th Amendment is reflective of that. The powers not given to the federal government are retained by the states and the people. In their wisdom, the founding fathers gave us Article 5 in the Constitution, and that provides two ways to amend our Constitution. First, Congress can propose amendments to the Constitution, and second, the states have the right to apply to have a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution upon the application of 2/3 of the states. Among our founders, one of the original delegates was George Mason of Virginia, and he foresaw our day. He noted that Congress might become abusive or exceed its powers. It might refuse to adopt a necessary or desirable amendment to the Constitution, particularly one that curbed its own authority. Our founders discussed the need for a congressional bypass in addition to just Congress proposing amendments. That's what's included in Article 5. I think, Senators, that we are in the day that was foreseen by our founding fathers, where the federal government has grown their authority and control so far beyond the proper balance envisioned by our framers and in our Constitution that action needs to be taken by the states as provided in the Constitution. This resolution provides for three topics. First is fiscal restraint, and commonly referred to as the balanced budget, but it can be a little bit more than that as described. You all know that the federal government is out of control in spending. We're borrowing money to pay debt on money that we borrowed. And if you watch the federal debt calculator, it goes up by $1 million every 30 seconds. So that's an important topic. The second is federal jurisdiction. And frankly, Senators, as I've been watching, that's one of the most important, because that can be the basis of a lot of the other problems that we have, that overextension and overreach of federal jurisdiction. And then the third is term limits. That's third on my list of the three, but it merits a discussion at the federal level. And our constituents want us to address and discuss that issue. As I said, these are important issues that our constituents want to be discussed and addressed. These Convention of States folks, as an organization, many of them are in the room today, they're very grassroots driven, as I've watched them and worked with them over the years. I have over 1,000 constituents in my district that support this and want this to happen. Congress has demonstrated the inability to control itself and take corrective action, regardless of who's in office. Again, Article 5 provides for the opportunity for the states to exercise that authority that they're granted in the Constitution. Congress can propose amendments if 2/3 of the body propose it. There's still a 3/4 ratification requirement on them. If 2/3 of the states call the convention, we still have to get 3/4 of the states to ratify whatever comes out of that. And that ratification, even the 2/3 is a high bar, but the ratification of 3/4 is a particularly high bar. And it should be, because we're talking about amending our Constitution in a way the founding fathers intended. The process is built so there's not a realistic expectation or threat of a runaway convention or ratification of such proposed amendments that are extreme. You know, the easiest thing for a legislature to do is kill a bill. And you have to get 3/4 of the states to ratify whatever comes out. Again, this is a workaround Congress. Congress's role is limited. They receive the resolutions from the states. They make sure they're consistent, that we have the 2/3. And if we do, then Congress is required to call the Convention of States. They designate a time and a place. That's it. The states meet, they control the process, and they do their work. This summer, Senators, I had an opportunity to serve as the chairman of Idaho's delegation to a simulated convention that was held in Virginia. It was myself, Representative Joe Alfieri, and Representative Mike Kingsley. And that experience really solidified my commitment to the three topics that we have in Article 5. I started out years ago as a balanced budget advocate because of the need that we have. But as time passed, I realized that the balanced budget is not enough. It's very important, but we need to be able to address the scope of problems that we have in the federal government. If you don't address jurisdiction, the federal government can balance the budget on the unfunded backs of the states, or it can simply increase taxes to fund the overextended and overgrown federal government. The single subjects are good, I'll support them, but they're not enough to allow the states to truly try and resolve the actual scope of what needs to be considered and addressed. We have to be able to address the aspects regarding jurisdiction, which can be the root of the problem. So, Senator, just a little bit, I'll give you a flavor of my participation in that simulated convention. We met, when we met, we had delegations from 49 of the 50 states. And we started by electing the chairman of the delegation. We established committees based on those three topics that are in the call and the resolution. I was on the Fiscal Restraint Committee, and I also was designated to work on a subcommittee that came up with a specific language for the proposed balanced budget amendment. That was ultimately passed by the committee and then adopted on the floor. But there were recommendations from all three committees that came to the floor. The delegates held each other accountable throughout the process. All proposals were debated. There was lively but respectful debate. Several proposals were amended, some were rejected, and ultimately some were adopted on all three of the topics. But the delegates took the process seriously. They kept in mind the requirement that we have to have 3/4 to ratify. And so that helped guide the process on what the outcome of the product was, because we wanted to do something that had an opportunity for ratification. So just an example of some of the things that came out, Senators. I talked about the balanced budget, but on the federal jurisdiction side, we passed a proposed amendment that provides legal standing to the states to challenge the constitutionality of federal action or congressional action. That's a hurdle that states cannot overcome in some cases. Also, a proposed amendment clarifying and narrowing the Commerce Clause and the definition of navigable waters. We fixed the Supreme Court justices at 9. We provided for more state control of public lands, and then we addressed term limits in Congress. Senators, this process was very familiar. It felt very familiar. It ran and functioned very similarly to how we function as a legislature. The delegates consisted primarily of state legislators. So it made sense that the process felt familiar. But we all understood the process and how it worked. I recognize that it was a condensed process. An actual convention will probably be a couple months instead of a couple days. But it was a process that was founded by our framers of the Constitution, and it worked. Our founders were inspired in the development and adoption of our Constitution. We all believe in the Constitution, and our Constitution provides that the states can exercise their authority to call that convention. I don't think hope for change is proven to be an effective strategy, and the problem is getting worse. We need to exercise our authority, Senators, and with that, I'd ask for your support.